Hi guys, it's Nicole and I'm back today with my Easter Creating with Collections kit. This will be layout 15 and here I am just kind of showing you what I've got left with my papers and kind of what I was thinking as far as some of the scraps. A lot of my scraps were kind of narrow strips, barcodes, things like that. I, at this point, realized that I still had a bunch of those 2x2 squares, and even though I set them aside, I don't end up using them. And I pulled out all the larger sheets of paper and just kind of had them up at the top of my desk, kind of easy to get to, but I wanted to make sure that anything I was die cutting from, I was reaching for scraps first, and then go to kind of the uncut papers from there. So this is just a sentiment strip die. I don't even know what brand it is, but basically there's 4 or 5 like rectangle sentiment strips and then 4 or 5 that cut it into a banner shape. And it's basically intended to be able to stamp a sentiment and put on a card. I like to use things like this on layouts. So typically when I'm looking at dies to potentially buy, I try to make sure that I can do double duty with them. I don't think I've ever actually used these on a card. I think I've mostly just used them on layouts, but it's kind of the same concept as the square dies. If I'm going to do any kind of piecing together a bunch of pattern paper, I would prefer to die cut it because I know it's going to line up better than if I had just used a trimmer to cut everything. And so I just kind of stacked them randomly while also trying to make sure that I didn't put too many colors that were similar next to each other. I originally wanted to do like a row of blue, a row of green, a row of yellow, and kind of have it go almost like color changing. But the patterns that I had left over in scraps and that I had taken the time to die cut, it just wasn't going to work for that. So instead I decided to mix it up and kind of just do more of like a quilt type of look. And then basically every other row is a little bit wider of a sentiment strip and then a row of a narrower size sentiment strip. And I'm glad that I did that because it just kind of worked out a little bit easier on some of the scraps that I had. Some of them were pretty thin and I don't know that I could have really gotten them into my trimmer to kind of clean them up and figure out something to do with them. So die cutting them was definitely a good situation for me and the scraps that I had left over. So I've mentioned this before, pattern paper is probably my favorite product. So while something like this is time consuming, I like the visual impact that it gives. I like seeing a lot of different patterns together as long as it doesn't look too crazy or overwhelming. If I had done like a whole 12 by 12 like this, I think it would have been too overpowering for me and the patterns that I was using. I think if I had more tone on tones and just kind of more muted stuff, it may have worked out. But for me, having something kind of loud and vibrant like this in a small section, that works for me and works for my process and works for my style. So I would definitely encourage you to kind of look at your scraps before you throw them away and kind of maybe challenge yourself to see if you can get like a punch or a die and just kind of use it up a little bit more. I almost was going to do some hexagons down here on this panel, but once I pulled out all my scraps and saw that they were just a lot of narrow strips, I figured out that that probably wasn't going to work for me. And I didn't want to die cut into sort of the larger pieces of pattern paper if I didn't need to, because at this point I really wasn't sure how many more layouts I was going to get out of it. When I did the Mother's Day layout, I thought, oh, this will be the last one that I do. And then there was still a ton of stuff left. And then I did this one. And I thought, oh, for sure, if I do this die cut thing, that'll use up a lot of paper. And there's still a ton left. So there is for sure another layout after this. I'm still kicking around the idea of doing one more and then kind of closing this up and moving on to some other projects. So I built that die cut area onto just a piece of printer paper. Mostly because it's thin, easy to work with once you get everything glued on there, but it was also 11 inches wide, which was what my photo collage was, because I also printed that on an 8.5 by 11. So it was just easier and less for me to have to cut down. And then I decided to go ahead and grab the stuff that I had printed from Nicole Jones 911 Designs and kind of include that in this one and just give myself, basically I wanted like grid paper. I wanted like something to print my journaling on, and I remembered that I had printed a bunch of her medium grid paper, which I absolutely love for doing things like where you're gonna print like a chunk of journaling and then put your title with it. It reads as a pattern paper, but it's also muted enough to have your journaling on and still have your journaling be bolder than the print. And then just the simple fact that it's grid, it's easy to line up your sticker letters on. It's easy to make sure that it's straight on your paper, that kind of thing. I also grabbed some of those, I think these are the 2-inch circles, and I don't have a 2-inch punch, so I just use a set of circle dies and kind of find one that seems to fit close. This one left a little white border, which I was really okay with. I think it went with like the paper that I was using and stuff, so I was okay with that. And then I grabbed this notebook edge border punch, and I'm going to go ahead and include that along the top. To me, that just kind of goes hand in hand with grid paper. It just gives it a little bit more detail, makes it look a little bit more fun, while also still serving that purpose of housing my journaling and housing my title. That is a reason that I like using photo collages, is it makes my choices easier. The photo collage is taking up a large portion of my layout, and then the leftover areas are the only things that I need to make decisions on. So I chose to do all the die cutting at the bottom of the layout. I like to put things that feel heavier at the bottom of the layout like that. And then my journaling is printed on much lighter colored paper. So to me, that reads as putting up on the top. And I didn't want to stack my journaling on top of all the die cutting and cover it up and stuff, because that pattern paper pretty much is most of my embellishing. I'm going to use those little circles as places for any other embellishments to kind of land and have a home. I also took a scrap of some craft cardstock that I just kind of keep on my desk with like white paper and stuff. And I cut 2 really thin strips of that and then just did like an angle cut on each end. I like having a border like this if I feel like where my photos and my pattern paper meet and just seem like they get lost. Like it feels like there's not a clear delineation between the two. So for me, something just like a strip of a solid cardstock is kind of my go-to. And then I just put one at the top as well, just to kind of have it match and feel a little bit more balanced as far as that goes. And then from there, I went through the sticker sheet, the die cuts, the chipboard, and just tried to find anything that was still Easter themed or heavily Easter. I actually appreciate the fact that Simple Stories will combine a line and have half of it read as Easter, half of it read as quote unquote spring, and yet you can still kind of cross back and forth between those. I saw they just released images and like pre-order information for their new Easter line. And I have to tell you, like a couple friends told me like, oh, did you see the new Simple Stories Easter? And I was like, oh, no. Like it could be the cutest thing in the world. But after dealing with this for, I think I'm like 9-10 months in on this, No, it's not for me. I don't know. I think it'll be a long time before I pull out Easter product. Like, I need a palette cleanse. I need to move on. It's definitely cute. I like some of the changes that they made to the style of their papers and stuff, but I still like the fact that they're keeping it to where not every single element, every single pattern reads as Easter. Some of it is spring themed, spring elements, spring phrases. I like when manufacturers kind of do that because I feel like it's giving you three options. You can either go the Easter route, you can go the spring route, or you can pull things that don't have specific wording on them and do things like Mother's Day or any kind of just basic everyday celebration that those colors would work for your photos. From there, I just grabbed some thickers for my stash, and I'm going to spell out basket or bunny baskets. At this point, I'm tired and I'm having a hard time coming up with titles. So I don't want to keep repeating, the Easter bunny was here or Easter baskets. Like, I'm 16 layouts in with a lot of Easter titles. So I just go with what pops into my head, and I try to make sure that those letters are what I have left. From there, again, I just kind of keep going back. Is there anything else that I can include and get used up? And I think that second round of going through everything, I just came up with a tab. And then I just grabbed 3 different color enamel dots out of my drawer and just put them in 3 different places. I wanted something else in those clusters, but I don't have any small stickers. I don't want to take the time to die cut little tiny hearts, which would have been super cute, but it was like, get it done and move on. So here is detail shots of everything. I will have at least one more layout for sure. I'll let you guys know if I end up doing 17. And then of course I will have a kit wrap up once I decide that I am for sure done. And with that, I'm going to leave you guys here and I will catch you next time. And as always, thank you for stopping by.